Hey gang, it's your buddy Platt here, and we're back for another homebrew experiment. This particular experiment was inspired by my college days, or when in my early adulthood when I first started drinking, first started bartending, going to bars. One of the popular drinks or popular style of beverage at the time was the wine cooler slash also known as an Alco-Pop or a malternative beverage. Examples were your Bartles and James wine coolers, your Zimas, your Smirnoff ices. They were new at the time, and they were hip and trendy, and they were really popular, and they worked on a lot of levels. And when I say work, not just for the consumers, but for the beverage companies. One of the realities in the world of regulated alcoholic beverages was a lot of places you have liquor stores that are open till certain hours, ran by their state stores, closed on Sundays, weren't always everywhere. And so if you wanted vodka, rum, gin, scotch, tequila, you had to go there. You couldn't buy it in most places in the U.S. Still, you can't go to your local grocery store, convenience store, and buy a bottle of vodka, rum, gin, or whatever those to make your own vodka, tonic, sodas, those type of drinks. But most places in the country, your local, again, grocery store, convenience store, you could buy beer and wine. So if you were a liquor company at the time, you wanted to get in those markets, well, you had to come up with something that wasn't based on distilled spirits. A company like Smirnoff. Smirnoff couldn't sell anything with actual Smirnoff vodka in it at those grocery stores or convenience stores. So what they did was created a malt version of a beverage that you would make with Smirnoff. A good example is that Smirnoff Ice was kind of a lemon lime drink and kind of their homage to a vodka 7-Up or vodka Sprite, what have you. But they used a malt base, which is similar to beer in the sense that it's made with malt too, or malted barley or whatever. So it's classified as beer. So then again, it can be sold in grocery stores and convenience stores. So that was a great way for the Smirnoffs to get into those markets. Also too, if you were a beer company like Coors, you sold beer, and a lot of men drink beer, but not all the women drink beer, especially back 25, 30 years ago. So they wanted to get in this malt beverage business because they could create something more approachable to the ladies. Coors came out with Zima, again, a lemon lime beverage that was light, refreshing. These are all around 4 or 5% alcohol by volume, so it was something you could have a couple of, not worry about getting too hammered. And again, they still sold in grocery stores and convenience stores. So with that being said, I've always wanted to, since I got in homebrewing, wanted to come up with my own malt beverage or see if I could replicate that style of beverage. In an earlier video I did, one of the first videos I did on YouTube, I did something, I guess my first stab at it. It was called How to Make Crunk Drunk Kool-Aid. Just a silly name I came up for it. But I basically fermented sugar, then came back and added some Kool-Aid to it. We did get something that might be remotely drinkable in the sense it was cherry Kool-Aid. The sugar fermented, we got an alcoholic beverage, and it was okay in taste. Part of the issue, though, and something I didn't learn till later, was if you just ferment straight sugar, sugar's actually very efficiently fermented, meaning that the yeast do a real good job of fermenting all the way through. And actually, you kind of get a drier finish a lot of times on fermenting sugar. Obviously, if you put just a ton of sugar, some of that will come through, but for the most part, fermenting sugar comes out fairly clean, which means you kind of get a dry finish. Where malt, a malt-based fermentation, doesn't always, it's not 100% efficient in the fermentation, so you get a little bit of that malt sweetness that comes through. And again, when you're making one of these wine cooler, alternative beverage style drinks, you want sweetness to come through. So what we're going to do here is use a malt base. I'm using 1.5 pounds of light dried malt extract. You want it as light as possible because we're creating a base then to add our flavor. That's how it works here. In the industrial setting, the large breweries or wherever that would make something like this, they have the advantage of carbon filtering, all different kind of filtration systems. They can create a liquid, alcoholic liquid, that is almost perfectly clear. Looks like almost like a 7-Up or lemon lime soda. We're not going to necessarily get that clear because I just don't have that stuff, but we're going to start with a light malt base, and we're going to ferment all the way through, and then we're going to clear it as much as we can as we would a light beer if we were brewing it, and then we're going to add our own flavoring. I'm going to use a Kool-Aid, a grape Kool-Aid liquid, and or liquid kind of extract. And this is not too far off what they would do. Again, they would make a malt base, and then whatever flavor extract they would add into that. And most likely too, they would force carbonate. They wouldn't bottle condition and stuff, so they'll just force some CO2 for bubbles, so we'll get whatever, you know, color and flavor we want. Luckily, because this is dark water, when we add it to this, you won't know that this is a malt base. You won't see that golden color that you do in a beer. You would just see the purple here. So that's what we're going to do. Yeast-wise, you're going to want to go with either a champagne yeast, or this one's a white wine yeast. You don't want to use a ale yeast. Ale yeast imparts flavor. You know, certain kind of yeast impart a lot of, ale yeast insert a lot of flavor. We're not doing that. We're adding our flavor with this. So we just want something that ferments clean. And this white wine yeast will do the job for us. Well, that being said, let me get my water to the boil, and we'll come back, add our malt, and work our way through the process. All right, gang, so I've got in here 3 quarts of water. I've got it up to a boil. We do this for a couple different reasons. A, for sanitation purposes. And speaking of sanitation, while this water is heating up, I got my 1-gallon fermenter and my airlock in the sanitation solution. We're getting that set up and clean. Also, too, we want it to make it easier for the dried malt extract to get incorporated into the solution. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. I have 1.5 pounds again of our light dried malt extract, and we're going to just pitch that in. You want to make sure you've got a big enough pot, because when you throw this malt in, it's going to foam up. So give yourself plenty of extra head space on in your pot for that malt extract. It's a malt beverage, malt-based beverage like beer, but we're not doing a brew. We're not going to do a 1-hour boil. One of the things about doing a boil is that it also affects the color of that malt. You do a longer or more intense boil, even if you use a light malt extract, it's going to add a little bit of color to that. Again, we're not looking for color in this. We just want to get a nice fermentation. So we're not doing a boil. I've cut the heat off, and we're just going to make sure we get all this malt extract thoroughly stirred in. Now, like I said earlier, we're doing a 1-gallon batch, but I've got 3 quarts of water in here. Where I'm going to make up that extra quart is I'm going to use about a quart of cold water / ice to bring this solution down quickly. Whenever you do a home brew, you'll want to get, in beer it's called wort, you want to get that down to somewhere around room temperature, 70-ish degrees, to where you can pitch your yeast. You want to get it down as fast as possible because you want to get it out of that danger zone or where bacteria could possibly grow or whatever. So you want to drop that temperature as fast as possible, and that's a little secret. I'll do a little less water volume in anything I boil, so then I could come back and add cold water to get me to the proper volume, but also get me down to that fermentation temperature. So let me get this stirred in, cool off, get in the fermenter. We'll do a gravity reading, and I'll talk you through the next step of the process. So, all right, we've got our, I don't necessarily want to call it wort because it works for beer, but we kind of got our wort. We got it cooled down to roughly 70 degrees. We pitched our yeast. We're using the white wine yeast. On the yeast, if you see me use like a packet of yeast in any of these videos, homebrew videos, those packets are generally designed for 5-gallon batches, so you'd want to use, a fifth to a quarter. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact conversion or whatever. So I threw in about a quarter pack of our white wine yeast. Did a gravity reading. We came out at 1.070. Just to kind of give you a roundabout number, if we get down to somewhere around 1.020, that's going to get us to about 6.5% alcohol. If we get down to 1.010, then we'd be like 7.8, something like that. So that's kind of what we're shooting for as far as our finishing gravity. We are going to let this go for about a week or so. Color comes out a little darker than I thought it would, especially because we didn't boil, because we're trying to keep the color light. But we're going to see after everything settles down, whatever. I got a feeling it'll lighten up a little bit. In full disclosure, and something I take pride on in the channel, if I make some kind of mistake, I'll kind of admit, or at some point, like I said, I used 1.5 pounds of dried malt extract. I had one bag I just bought. It is light as could be, whatever. That second bag was an older bag I had. If you tend to have some malt leave around, it'll tend to darken a little bit. So maybe that's why this color is a little darker. But I got a feeling through fermentation or whatever, it will lighten up. So we're going to let this go for a week. We'll come back, do our gravity reading, and then we're going to cold crash this or whatever, or again try to get that yeast to settle, try to get this solution to clear up, and we'll come back. Actually, we'll come back in a couple weeks, because I'll transfer to a secondary, let this crash, let this clear up. We'll come back and do a gravity reading, and then we would add our flavoring then. We don't want to add it now because the yeast is working or whatever. And these flavoring packets or whatever, if you wanted to use Kool-Aid, Hawaiian Punch, some kind of flavor, whatever you have, if you wanted to use like the flavoring packets for the soda stream machines or whatever, those have preservatives, and those don't work well with the yeast. So we're not going to use the two at the same time. We're going to let the yeast get their job done before we add the flavor. So let's come back and we'll check our gravity. All right, gang, we're back. It's been a couple of weeks now, and between the last segment, I had a bit of fortune hit me, or an idea actually given me by my roommate. I have to give him full credit. So the original plan was I was going to ferment this out for a week. We rack it to a secondary. We were going to cold crash with some potassium sorbate and try to clear this liquid as much as we can before we added our Kool-Aid flavoring. However, in the time since, my roommate was asking me, hey, what's in the fermenter? What do you got going? We got talking, and I was telling him about these malt beverages and how were produced commercially, and that they would use these massive carbon filters, and again, in an industrial setting, they're able to do some filtration that your common home brewer can't. And he brought up the idea, hey, why don't you just use one of these Brita water filters? I'm like, what? He said, yeah, they're carbon filters. So they filter your water. They filter everything out. Any minerals and what have you, chlorine, fluoride, stuff like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's onto something. So I went out and got me one of these Brita water filters. Now, some of you might out there be saying, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's use them. We are gambling here a little bit. Traditionally, when you brew a beer, mead, cider, wine, what have you, you will either stir your wort, you'll shake your solution, what have you, to get extra oxygen for the yeast. But once fermentation starts, you don't want to shake, you don't want to stir, you don't want to bring extra oxygen in it, because you can then oxidize the solution. We are going to try this after fermentation, but going through this Brita filter, we are probably going to introduce some oxygen, expose it to more air than it would even just a simple, if we transfer using a racking cane, we're going to probably expose this to more air, or we definitely will, than using like a racking cane to transfer from one to the other. So there's a potential we might oxidize this and might ruin the batch. That being said, that's the point of this whole series. We want to experiment. We want to try different things. And I'm a gambler, so I'm willing to gamble. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to run it through this Brita filter. And because these filters filter very fine, very small particles of water, we're obviously going to filter out all the yeast, which are a lot bigger than your chlorine, fluoride particles that are in your water. So we're not going to have any yeast to transfer into our bottles, which means we won't be able to bottle condition, which means I will then use the SodaStream machine to ferment, and we'll add our Kool-Aid flavoring then, and here in a couple 2-3 weeks, maybe a little longer, we'll have our next tasting video, and then we'll try this and see how it comes out, see if we oxidized it, if we screwed up in any way, if we get, you know, if the Kool-Aid flavor is predominant, or if we just get like a bland beer taste to it, what have you. But I wanted to tell you that idea that I'm going to try the Brita filter and see how it works on this, because if this works and we don't oxidize it, then this may be something I use in a future brew. If it screws up the batch, then we know not to do it. We'll try more traditional ways of filtering. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or ideas for future brewing experiments, please leave them in the comments section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.